The Secret Doctrine by Elena Petrovna Blavatsky, a facsimile of the original edition of 1888, printed by the Cunningham Press, Alhambra, California. Volume 1, Cosmogenesis. Part 2, The Evolution of Symbolism in its approximate order, with explanatory sections. Section 13, The Seven Creations. There was neither day nor night, nor sky nor earth, nor darkness, nor light, nor any other thing save only one, unapprehensible by intellect, or that which is Brahma and Bhumis, spirit, and Pradhana, crude matter. Veda, Vishnu Purana commentary. Or literally, one Pradhanika, Brahma spirit, that was. The Pradhanika Brahma spirit is Mula Prakriti and Parabhamam. In Vishnu Purana, Parasara says to Maitreya, his pupil, I have thus explained to you, excellent Muni, 6 creations. The creation of the Aravaksrota's beings was the 7th, and was that of man. Then he proceeds to speak of 2 additional and very mysterious creations, variously interpreted by the commentators. Origen, commentating upon the books written by Celsus, his opponent, books which were all destroyed by the prudent church fathers, evidently answers the objections of his contradictor and reveals his system at the same time. This was evidently septenary. But his theogony, the genesis of the stars or planets, that of sound and color, all found as an answer satire and no better. Celsus, you see, desiring to exhibit his learning, speaks of a ladder of creation with 7 gates, and on the top of it the 8th ever closed. The mysteries of the Persian Mithras are explained, and musical reasons, moreover, are added. And to these, again, he strives to add a second explanation, connected also with musical considerations, that is, with the 7 notes of the scale, the 7 spirits of the stars, etc., etc. Note: Origen contra Celsus, B. 6, chapter 22. End of note. Valentinus expatiates upon the power of the great 7, who were called to bring forth this universe after Aritus, or the Ineffable, whose name is composed of 7 letters, had represented the first hebdomad. This name, Aritus, is one to indicate the 7-fold nature of the One, the Logos. The goddess Rhea, says Proclus in Timaeus, page 121, is a monad, duad, and heptad, comprehending in herself all the Titanidae, who are 7. The 7 creations are found in almost every Purana. They are preceded by what Wilson translates the indiscrete principle, absolute spirit, independent of any relation with objects of sense. They are 1. Mahatava, the universal soul, infinite intellect, or divine mind. 2. Bhuta, or Bhutasarga, elemental creation, the first differentiation of universal indiscrete substance. 3. Indriya, or Aindriyaka, organic evolution. These 3 were the Prakrita creations, the developments of indiscrete nature preceded by indiscrete principle. 4. Mukhya, the fundamental creation of perceptible things, was that of inanimate bodies. Note, the text says, and the 4th creation is here the primary, for things immovable and emphatically known as primary. See Fitzwood Hall's corrections. End of note. 5. Tairia Gyonya, or Tiriaksrotas, was that of animals. 6. Urdvasrotas, or that of divinities, in brackets question mark. Note, how can divinities have been created after the animals? The esoteric meaning of the expression animals is the germs of all animal life, including man. Man is called a sacrificial animal, and an animal that is the only one among animal creation who sacrifices to the gods. Moreover, by the sacred animals, the 12 signs of the zodiac are often meant in the sacred texts, as already stated. End of note. 7. Arvaksrotas was that of man. See Vishnu Purana. This is the order given in the exoteric texts. According to esoteric teaching, there are 7 primary and 7 secondary, quote, creations, unquote. The former being the forces self-evolving from the one causeless force, the latter showing the manifested universe emanating from the already differentiated divine elements. Esoterically as well as exoterically, all the above enumerated creations stand for the 7 periods of evolution, whether after an age or a day of Brahma. This is the teaching par excellence of occult philosophy, which, however, never uses the term creation, nor even that of evolution, with regard to primary creation, but calls all such forces the aspects of the causeless force. In the Bible, the 7 periods are dwarfed into the 6 days of creation and the 7th day of rest, and the Westerns adhere to the letter. In the Hindu philosophy, when the active creator has produced the world of gods, the germs of all the undifferentiated elements and the rudiments of future senses, the world of noumena, in short, the universe remains unaltered for a day of Brahma, a period of 4,320,000,000 years. This is the 7th passive period of the Sabbath day of Eastern philosophy. That follows 6 periods of active evolution. In the Satapatha Brahmana, Brahma, neuter, the absolute cause of all causes, radiates the gods. Having radiated the gods through its inherent nature, the work is interrupted. In the first book of Manu it is said, at the expiration of each night, pralaya, Brahma, having been asleep, awakes and, through the sole energy of the motion, causes to emanate from itself the spirit, which in its essence is and yet is not. In the Sefer Jezira, the Kabbalistic book of creation, the author has evidently repeated the words of Manu. In it, the divine substance is represented as having alone existed from the eternity, boundless and absolute, and as having emitted from itself the spirit. One is the Spirit of the living God, blessed be his name, who liveth for ever. Voice, Spirit, and Word, this is the Holy Spirit. Sefer Jezira, chapter 1, Mishnah 9. And this is the Kabbalistic abstract Trinity, so unceremoniously anthropomorphized by the Fathers. From this triple one emanated the whole cosmos. First from one emanated number 2, or air, the creative element, and then number 3, water, proceeded from the air. Ether or fire complete the mystic 4, the Arba'il, from the same source. In the Eastern doctrine, fire is the first element, ether, synthesizing the whole, since it contains all of them. In the Vishnu Purana, the whole 7 periods are given, and the progressive evolution of spirit-soul and of the 7 forms of matter or principles are shown. It is impossible to enumerate them in this work. The reader is asked to peruse one of the Puranas. Yehuda began, it is written, Elohim said, let there be a firmament in the midst of waters. At the time that the Holy created the world, they, created 7 heavens above. He created 7 earths below, 7 seas, 7 days, 7 rivers, 7 weeks, 7 years, 7 times, and 7,000 years that the world has been, the 7th of all the millennium. So here are 7 earths below. They are all inhabited except those which are above and those below. And between each earth a heaven, firmament, is spread out between each other, and there are in them, these earths, creatures who look different from each other. But if you object and say that all the children of the world came out from Adam, it is not so. And the lower earths, where do they come from? They are from the chain of the earth, and from the heaven below, etc., etc. Note, Kabbalah, page 415-16 by T. Mayer, Philadelphia. End of note. Irenaeus is our witness, and a very unwilling one too, that the Gnostics taught the same system, veiling very carefully the true esoteric meaning. This veiling, however, is identical with that of the Vishnu Purana and others. Thus, Irenaeus writes of the Marcosians. They maintain that first of all the four elements, fire, water, earth, and air, were produced after the image of the primary tetrad above, and that then if we add their operations, namely heat, cold, dryness, and moisture, an exact likeness of the Ogdoad is presented. From Book 1, Chapter 17. Only this likeness and the Ogdoad itself is a blind, just as in the 7 creations of the Vishnu Puranas, to which 2 more are added, of which the 8th, termed Anugraha, possesses both the qualities of goodness and darkness, a Sankhyan more than a Puranic idea. For Irenaeus says again, Book 1, Chapter 30, verse 6, that they, the Gnostics, had a like 8th creation, which was good and bad, divine and human. They affirm that man was formed on the 8th day. Sometimes they affirm that he was made on the 6th day, and at others on the 8th, unless perchance they mean that his earthly part was formed on the 6th day, and his fleshly part, in brackets question mark, on the 8th day, these two being distinguished by them. They were so distinguished, but not as Irenaeus gives it. The Gnostics had a superior hebdomad, as an inferior one in heaven, and a third terrestrial hebdomad on the plane of matter. Iao, the mystery god and the regent of the moon, as given in Origen's chart, was the chief of these superior 7 heavens, hence identical with the chief of the lunar Pitris, that name being given by them to the lunar Diancochans. Note, superior to the spirits or heavens of the earth only. End of note. Quote, they affirm that these 7 heavens are intelligent and speak of them as being angels, unquote, writes the same Irenaeus, and adds that on this account they termed Iao Hebdomas, while his mother was called Ogdoas, because, as he explains, she preserved the number of the first begotten and primary Ogdoad of the Pleroma, from the same source, Book 1, verse 2. This first begotten Ogdoad was in Theogony, the second Logos, the manifested, because he was born of the 7-fold first Logos, hence he is the 8th on this manifested plane, and B, in astrology, it was the sun, Martanda, the 8th son of Aditi, whom she rejects while preserving her 7 sons, the planets. For the ancients have never regarded the sun as a planet, but as a central and fixed star. This, then, is the second hebdomad born of the 7-rayed one, Agni, the sun, and what not, only not the 7 planets, which are Surya's brothers, not his sons. These astral gods, whose chief with the Gnostics was Ildabauth, from Ilda, child, and Baut, the egg, the son of the Pleroma, was his Ildabauth's son. Note, see Isis Unveiled, Volume 2, page 183, end of note. He produces from himself these 6 stellar spirits, Jove, Jehovah, Sabaoth, Adonai, Eloi, Osiraios, Astaphios, and it is they who are the second or inferior hebdomad. Note, see also King's Gnostics. Other sects regarded Jehovah as Ildabauth himself. King identifies him with Saturn. End of note. As to the third, it is composed of the 7 primeval men, the shadows of the lunar gods, projected by the first hebdomad. In this, the Gnostics did not, as seen, differ much from the esoteric doctrine, except that they veiled it. As to the charge made by Irenaeus, who was evidently ignorant of the true tenets of the heretics, with regard to man being created on the sixth day, and man being created on the eighth, this relates to the mysteries of the inner man. It will become comprehensible to the reader only after he has read Book 2 and understood well the anthropogenesis of the esoteric doctrine. Ildabauth is a copy of Manu. The latter boasts, "O best of twice-born men, know that I, Manu, am he, the creator of all this world, whom that male Viraj spontaneously produced." 1, verse 33. He first creates the 10 lords of being, the Prajapatis, who, as verse 36 says, produce 7 other Manus, the ordinances of Manu. Ildabauth does likewise. "I am Father and God, and there is no one above me," he exclaims, for which his mother coolly puts him down by saying, "Do not lie, Ildabauth, for the father of all, the first man, Anthropos, is above thee, and so is Anthropos, the son of Anthropos." Irenaeus, Book 1, Chapter 30, verse 6. This is a good proof that there were 3 Logoi besides the 7 born of the first, one of these being the solar Logos, and again, who was that Anthropos himself, so much higher than Ildabauth? The Gnostic records alone can solve this riddle. In Pistis Sophia, the 4-voweled name Yeov is in each case accompanied by the epithet of the primal or first man. This shows again that the Gnosis was but an echo of archaic doctrine. The names answering to Parabrahm, to Brahm, and Manu, the first thinking man, are composed of 1-voweled, 3-voweled, and 7-voweled sounds. Marcus, whose philosophy was certainly more Pythagorean than anything else, speaks of revelation to him of the 7 heavens sounding each one vowel as they pronounce the 7 names of the 7 angelic hierarchies. When spirit has permeated every minutest atom of the 7 principles of cosmos, then the secondary creation after the above-mentioned period of rest begins. The creators, Elohim, outline in the 2nd hour the shape of man, says Rabbi Simeon in the Noctameron of the Hebrews. There are 12 hours in the day, says the Mishnah, and it is during these that creation is accomplished. The 12 hours of the day are again the dwarfed copy, the faint yet faithful echo of primitive wisdom. They are like the 12,000 divine years of the gods, a cyclic blind. Every day of Brahma has 14 Manus, which the Hebrew Kabbalists, following however in this the Chaldeans, have disguised into 12 hours. Note, elsewhere however, the identity is revealed. See Supra, the quotation from Ibn Gabriel and his 7 heavens, 7 earths, etc. End of note. The Noctameron of Apollonius of Tyana is the same thing. The dodecahedron lies concealed in the perfect cube, says the Kabbalists. The mystic meaning of this is that the 12 great transformations of spirit into matter, the 12,000 divine years, take place during the 4 great ages, or the first Mahayuga. Beginning with the metaphysical and the suprahuman, it ends in the physical and purely human natures of cosmos and man. Eastern philosophy can give the number of mortal years that run along the line of spiritual and physical evolutions of the seen and the unseen, if Western science fails to do so. Primary creation is called the creation of light, spirit, and the secondary, that of darkness, matter. Note, this must not be confused with pre-cosmic darkness, the divine all, end of note. Both are found in Genesis chapters 1, verse 2, and at the beginning of chapter 2. The first is the emanation of the self-born gods, Elohim, the second of physical nature. This is why it is said in the Zohar, O companions, companions, man as emanation was both man and woman, as well on the side of the father as on the side of the mother. And this is the sense of the words. And Elohim spoke, Let there be light, and it was light. And this is the twofold man. Light, moreover, on our plane is darkness in the higher spheres. Man and woman on the side of the father, spirit, refers to primary creation, and on the side of the mother, matter, to the secondary. The twofold man is Adam Kadmon, the male and female abstract prototype and the differentiated Elohim. Man proceeds from the Jian Kochan and is a fallen angel, a god in exile, as will be shown. In India these creations were described as follows. 1. Mat Tattva creation, so called because it was the primordial self-evolution of that which had to become Mahat, the divine mind, conscious and intelligent, esoterically, the spirit of the universal soul, worthiest of ascetics, through its potency, the potency of that cause. Every produced cause comes by its proper nature. Vishnu Purana. Seeing that the potencies of all beings are understood only through the knowledge of Tat, Brahma, which is beyond reasoning, creation and the like, such potencies are referable to Brahma. Tat, then, precedes the manifestation. The first was Mahat, says Linga Purana. For the one, the Tat, is neither first nor last, but all. Exoterically, however, this manifestation is the work of the Supreme One, a natural effect, rather, of an eternal cause. Or, as the commentator says, it might have been understood to mean that Brahma was then created, in brackets, ? Being identified with Mahat, active intelligence, or the operating will of the Supreme. Esoteric philosophy renders it the operating law. It is on the right comprehension of this tenet in the Brahmanas and Puranas that hangs, we believe, the apple of discord between the three Vedantin sects, the Advaita, Dvaita, and the Visishtadvaitas. The first arguing rightly that Parabrahman, having no relation as the absolute all to the manifested world, the infinite having no connection with the finite, can neither will nor create, that therefore Brahma, Mahat, Ishvara, or whatever name the creative power may be known by, creative gods and all, are simply an elusive aspect of Parabrahman in the conception of the conceivers, while the other sects identify the impersonal cause with the creator, or Ishvara. Mahat, or Mahabuddhi, is, with the Vaishnavas, however, divine mind in active operation, or, as Anaxagoras has it, an ordering and disposing mind, which was the cause of all things. Nous odia cosmonte kai pantheon aetios. Wilson saw at a glance the suggestive connection between Mahat and the Phoenician Mot, or Mut, who was female with the Egyptians, the goddess Mut, the mother, which, like Mahat, he says, was the first product of the mixture, in brackets ? Of spirit and matter, and the first rudiment of creation. Ex connexione autem ejus spiritus produit mot, from whose seed were created all living things. Repeats Brücker, Book 1, page 240, giving it a still more materialistic and anthropomorphic coloring. Nevertheless, the esoteric sense of the doctrine is seen through every exoteric sentence on the very face of the old Sanskrit texts that treat of primordial creation. The Supreme Soul, the all-permeant Sarvaga, substance of the world, having entered, been drawn, into matter, Prakriti, and spirit, Purusha, agitated the mutable and the immutable principles, the season of creation, Manvantara, having arrived. Note: the nous of the Greeks, which is spiritual divine mind, or mens, Mahat, operates upon matter in the same way. It enters into and agitates it. Spiritus intus alit, totamque infusa per artus, mens agitat molem, et magno se corpore miscet. In the Phoenician cosmogony, spirit mixing with its own principles gives rise to creation also. From Brücke, Book 1, page 240. The Orphic Triad shows an identical doctrine, for their phanes, or eros, chaos containing crude undifferentiated cosmic matter, and chronos, time, are the three cooperating principles emanating from the unknowable and concealed point, which produce the work of creation. And they are the Hindu Purusha, phanes, pradhana, chaos, and kala, chronos, or time. The good Professor Wilson does not like the idea, as no Christian clergyman, however liberal, would. He remarks that, as presently explained, the mixture of the Supreme Spirit of Soul is not mechanical. It is an influence or effect exerted upon intermediate agents which produce effects. The sentence in Vishnu Purana, as fragrance affects the mind from its proximity merely, and not from any immediate operation upon mind itself, so the Supreme influenced the elements of creation. The reverend and erudite Syncretist correctly explains. As perfumes do not delight the mind by actual contact, but by the impression they make upon the sense of smelling, which communicates it to the mind, adding, the entrance of the Supreme into spirit, as well as matter, is less intelligible than the view elsewhere taken of it, as the infusion of spirit identified with the Supreme into Prakriti or matter alone. He prefers the verse in Padma Purana, he who is called the male spirit of Prakriti, that same divine Vishnu entered into Prakriti. This view is certainly more akin to the plastic character of certain verses in the Bible concerning the patriarchs, such as Lot, Genesis 19, verses 34 to 38, and even Adam in chapter 4, verse 1, and others of a still more anthropomorphic nature. But it is just that which led humanity to phallicism, Christian religion being honeycombed with it from the first chapter of Genesis down to the Revelation. End of note. Esoteric doctrine teaches that the Dhyan-kohans are the collective aggregate of divine intelligence or primordial mind, and that the first manas, the seven mind-born spiritual intelligences, are identical with the former. Hence the Quan Shi Yin, the golden dragon in whom are the seven of stanza 3, is the primordial Logos, or Brahma, the first manifested creative power, and the Dhyana energies are the Manus, or Manus Vayambhuva collectively. The direct connection, moreover, between the Manus and Mahat is easy to see. Man is from the root man, to think, and thinking proceeds from the mind. It is in cosmogony, the pre-nebular period. 2. The second creation, Buddha, was of the rudimental principles, tanmatras, thence termed the elemental creation, Buddha Sarga. Note: all these sentences are quoted from Vishnu Purana, Book 1, Chapter 2. End of note. It is the period of the first breath of the differentiation of pre-cosmic elements or matter. Buddhadi means literally the origin of the elements, and precedes Buddha Sarga, their creation or differentiation of those elements in primordial akasha, chaos or vacuity. Note, Vishnu is both Bhutisa, Lord of the elements and all things, and Vishwarupa, universal substance or soul. End of note. In the Vishnu Purana it is said to precede along and belong to the triple aspect of Ankara, translated egotism, but meaning rather that untranslatable term, the I amness, that which first issues from Mahat or divine mind, the first shadowy outline of selfhood, for pure Ahankara becomes passionate and finally rudimental, initial. It is the origin of conscious, as of all unconscious being, though the esoteric school rejects the idea of anything being unconscious, save on this our plane of illusion and ignorance. At this stage of the second creation, the second hierarchy of the manas appear, the Dhyan-kohans or Devas, who are the origin of form, Rupa. The Chitrasi-kandina, bright-crested, or the Riksha, those rishis who have become the informing souls of the seven stars, or the Great Bear. Note, see concerning their post-types, the treatise written by Tritemius, Agrippa's master, 16th century, concerning the 7 secondaries or spiritual intelligences, who, after God, actuate the universe, giving out, besides secret cycles and several prophecies, certain facts and beliefs about the genii, or the Elohim, which preside over and guide the septenary stages of the world's course. End of note. In astronomical and cosmogonical language, this creation relates to the first stage of cosmic life, the fire mist period after its chaotic stage, when atoms issue from Laya. Note, from the first, the Orientalists have found themselves beset by great difficulties with regard to any possible order in the Puranic creations. Brahma is very often confused with Brahma by Wilson, for which he is criticized by his successors. The original Sanskrit texts are preferred by Mr. Fitzedward Hall for the translation of Vishnu Purana and texts to those used by Wilson. Had Professor Wilson enjoyed the advantages which are now at the command of the student of Indian philosophy, unquestionably he would have expressed himself differently, as said by the editor of his works. This reminds one of the answer given by one of Thomas Taylor's admirers to those scholars who criticized his translations of Plato. Thomas Taylor may have had less knowledge of the Greek than his critics have, but he understood Plato far better than they do, he said. Our present Orientalists disfigure the mystic sense of the Sanskrit texts far more than Wilson ever did, though the latter is undeniably guilty of very gross errors. End of note. 3. The third, the Indriya, was the modified form of Ahankara, the conception of I, from Aham, I, termed the organic creation, or creation of the senses, Aindriyaka. These 3 were the Prakrita creation, the discrete developments of indiscrete nature, preceded by the indiscrete principle. Preceded by ought to be replaced here with beginning by. Buddhi for the latter is neither a discrete nor an indiscrete quantity, but partakes of the nature of both, in man as in cosmos, a unit, a human monad on the plane of illusion, when once freed from the 3 forms of Ahankara and liberated from its terrestrial manas. Buddhi becomes truly a continued quantity, both in duration and extension, because eternal and immortal. Earlier it is stated that the third creation, abounding with the quality of goodness, is termed Urdhvasrotas, and a page or 2 further the Urdhvasrotas creation is referred to as the 6th creation, that of the divinities. Page 75. This shows plainly that earlier as well as later Manvantaras have been purposely confused to prevent the profane from perceiving the truth. This is called incongruity and contradictions by the Orientalists. Note, quote, the 3 creations beginning with intelligence are elemental, but the 6 creations which proceed from the series of which intellect is the first are the work of Brahma, from Vayu Purana. Here, creations mean everywhere stages of evolution. Mahat, intellect or mind, which corresponds with manas, the former being on the cosmic and the latter on the human plane, stands here too, lower than Buddhi or supra-divine intelligence. Therefore, when we read in Linga Purana that the first creation was that of Mahat, intellect being the first in manifestation, we must refer that specified creation to the first evolution of our system or even our earth, none of the preceding ones being discussed in the Puranas, but only occasionally hinted at. End of note. This, quote, creation, unquote, of the immortals, the Devasarga, is the last of the first series and has a universal reference, namely to evolutions in general, not specifically to our Manvantara, but the latter begins with the same over and over again, showing that it refers to several distinct kalpas. For it is said, quote, "At the close of the past Padmakalpa, the divine Brahma awoke from his night of sleep and beheld the universe void," unquote. Then Brahma is shown going once more over the 7 creations in the secondary stage of evolution, repeating the first 3 on the objective plane. 4. The Mukhya, the primary, as it begins the series of 4. Neither the word inanimate bodies nor yet immovable things, as translated by Wilson, gives a correct idea of the Sanskrit terms used. Esoteric philosophy is not the only one to reject the idea of any atom being inorganic, for it is found also in Orthodox Hinduism. Moreover, Wilson himself says in his Collected Works, Volume 3, page 381, all the Hindu systems consider vegetable bodies as endowed with life. Karakara, or the synonymous Stavara, and Jangama is therefore inaccurately rendered by animate and inanimate, sentient beings and unconscious, or conscious and unconscious beings, etc., etc. Locomotive and fixed would be better, since trees are considered to possess souls. Mukhya is the creation or organic evolution of the vegetable kingdom. In this secondary period, the 3 degrees of elemental or rudimental kingdoms are evolved in this world, corresponding inversely in order to the 3 prakritic creations during the primary period of Brahma's activity. As in that period, in the words of Vishnu Purana, the first creation was that of Mahat, intellect, the second of Tanmatras, rudimental principles, and the third that of the senses, Aindriyaka. In this one, the order of the elemental forces stands thus. 1. The nascent centers of forces, intellectual and physical. 2. The rudimental principles, never force, so to say. And 3. Nascent apperception, which is the Mahat of the lower kingdoms, especially developed in the 3rd order of elementals. These are succeeded by the objective kingdom of minerals, in which latter that apperception is entirely latent, to redevelop only in the plants. The Mukhya, creation, then, is the middle point between the 3 lower and the 3 higher kingdoms, which represent the 7 esoteric kingdoms of cosmos, as of earth. 5. The Tiryak Srotas, or Tairyagyonya creation, that of the sacred animals, corresponding only to earth, to the dumb animal creation. Note, Professor Wilson translates it as though animals were higher on the scale of creation than divinities or angels, although the truth about the devas is very plainly stated further on. This creation, says the text, is both primary, prakrita, and secondary, vaikrita. It is the latter as regards the origin of the gods from Brahma, the personal anthropomorphic creator of our material universe. It is the former, primary, as affecting Rudra, who is the immediate production of the first principle. Rudra is not alone a title of Shiva, but embraces agents of creation, angels and men, as will be shown further on. End of note. That which is meant by animals in primary creation is the germ of awakening consciousness or of apperception, that which is faintly traceable in some sensitive plants on earth, and more distinctly in the protestic monera. Note, neither plant nor animal, but an existence between the 2. End of note. On our globe, during the first round, animal, quote, creation, unquote, precedes that of man, while the former, or mammal, evolves from the latter in our 4th round on the physical plane. In round 1, the animal atoms are drawn into a cohesion of human physical form, while in round 4, the reverse occurs according to magnetic conditions developed during life. And this is metempsychosis. See Mineral Monad in 5 Years of Theosophy, page 276. This 5th stage of evolution, called exoterically creation, may be viewed in both the primary and secondary periods, one as the spiritual and cosmic, the other as the material and terrestrial. It is archebiosis, or life origination. Origination so far, of course, as the manifestation of life on all the 7 planes is concerned. It is at this period of evolution that the absolutely eternal universal motion, or vibration, that which is called in esoteric language the Great Breath, differentiates in the primordial first manifested atom. More and more, as chemical and physical sciences progress, does this occult axiom find its corroboration in the world of knowledge. The scientific hypothesis that even the simplest elements of matter are identical in nature and differ from each other only owing to the variety of the distributions of atoms in the molecule or speck of substance, or by the modes of its atomic vibration, gains every day more ground. Thus, as the differentiation of the primordial germ of life has to precede the evolution of the Jiankochan of the third group or hierarchy of being in primary creation, before those gods can become Rupa, embodied in their first ethereal form, so animal creation has to precede, for that same reason, divine man on earth. And this is why we find in the Puranas the 5th, the Tariagyonya creation, was that of animals, and 6, the Urdhvasrotas creation, or that of divinities, from Vishnu Purana, Book 1, Chapter 1. But these divinities are simply the prototypes of the first race, the fathers of their mind-born progeny, with the soft bones. Note: created beings, explains Vishnu Purana, although they are destroyed in their individual forms at the periods of dissolution, yet being affected by the good or evil acts of former existences, are never exempted from their consequences. And when Brahma produces the world anew, they are the progeny of his will. Collecting his mind into itself, yoga willing, Brahma creates the 4 orders of beings, termed gods, demons, progenitors, and men. Progenitors meaning the prototypes and evolvers of the first root race of men. The progenitors are the Pitris, and are of 7 classes. They are said in exoteric mythology to be born of Brahma's side, like Eve from the rib of Adam. End of note. It is these who became the evolvers of the sweat-born, an expression explained in Book 2. Finally, the 6th creation is followed, and creation in general closed by 7, the evolution of the Arvaksrotas beings, which was the 7th and was that of man, from Vishnu Purana, Book 1. The 8th creation mentioned is no creation at all. It is a blind again, for it refers to a purely mental process, the cognition of the 9th creation, which in its turn is an effect, manifesting in the secondary of that which was a creation in the primary, Prakrita creation. Note: these notions, remarks Dr. Wilson, the birth of Rudra and the saints, seem to have been borrowed from the Saivas, and to have been awkwardly engrafted upon the Vaishnava system. The esoteric meaning ought to have been consulted before venturing such a hypothesis. End of note. The 8th, then, called Anugraha, the Pratyaya Sarga, or the intellectual creation of the Sankhyas, explained in Karika, verse 46, page 146, is that creation of which we have a perception in its esoteric aspect, and to which we give intellectual assent, Anugraha, in contradistinction to organic creation. It is the correct perception of our relations to the whole range of, quote, gods, unquote, and especially of those we bear to the Kumaras, the so-called 9th creation, which is in reality an aspect of, or reflection of, the 6th in our Manvantara, the Vaivashvata. There is a 9th, the Kumara creation, which is both primary and secondary, says Vishnu Purana, the oldest of such texts. Note: Parasara, the Vedic rishi, who received the Vishnu Purana from Pulastya and taught it to Maitreya, is placed by the Orientalists at various epochs, as correctly observed in the Hindu class. Their speculations as to his era differ widely from 575 BC to 1391 BC and cannot be trusted. Quite so, but no less, however, than any other date as assigned by the Sanskritists, so famous in this department of arbitrary fancy. End of note. The Kumaras, explains an esoteric text, are the Dhyanis derived immediately from the Supreme Principle, who reappear in the Vaivasvata Manu period for the progress of mankind. Note: they may indeed mark a special or extra creation, since it is they who, by incarnating themselves within the senseless human shells of the two first root races, and a great portion of the third root race, create, so to speak, a new race, that of thinking, self-conscious, and divine men. End of note. The commentator of the Vishnu Purana corroborates it by remarking that these sages live as long as Brahma, and they are only created by him in the first kalpa, although their generation is very commonly and inconsistently introduced in the Varaha, or Padmakalpa, the secondary. Thus, the Kumaras are exoterically the creation of Rudra or Nilaloita, a form of Shiva, by Brahma, and of certain other mind-born sons of Brahma. But, in the esoteric teaching, they are the progenitors of the true spiritual self in the physical man. The high Prajapati, while the Pitris, or lower Prajapati, are no more than the fathers of the model, or type of his physical form, made in their image. 4, and occasionally 5, are mentioned freely in the exoteric texts, 3 Kumaras being secret. Compare what is said of the fallen angels in Book 2. Note: the 4 Kumaras are the mind-born sons of Brahma. Some specify 7. All these 7 Vaidhatra, the patronymic of the Kumaras, the Maker's sons, are mentioned and described in Ishvara Krishna's Sankhya Karika, with the commentary of Gaudapadacharya, Sankhyakar's Paraguru, attached to it. It discusses the nature of the Kumaras, though it refrains from mentioning by name all the 7 Kumaras, but calls them instead the 7 sons of Brahma, which they are, as they are created by Brahma in Rudra. The list of names it gives us is Sanaka, Sanandana, Sanatana, Kapila, Ribu, and Pankashika. But these are again all aliases. End of note. The exoteric 4 are Sanat Kumara, Sananda, Sanaka, and Sanatana, and the esoteric 3 are Sana, Kapila, and Sanatsuyata. Special attention is once more drawn to this class of Jiankochans, for herein lies the mystery of generation and heredity hinted at in Book 1. See the 4 orders of angelic beings. Comment on stanza 7. Book 2 explains their position in their divine hierarchy. Meanwhile, let us see what the exoteric texts say about them. They do not say much, nothing to him who fails to read between the lines. Quote, we must have recourse here to other Puranas for the elucidation of this term, unquote, remarks Wilson, who does not suspect for one moment that he is in the presence of the, quote, angels of darkness, unquote, the mythical great enemy of his church. Therefore he contrives to elucidate no more than that these divinities, declining to create progeny, and thus rebelling against Brahma, remained, as the name of the first implies, ever boys, Kumaras, that is, ever pure and innocent, whence their creation is also called the Kumara. Book 1, Chapter 5, Vishnu Purana. Note: so untrustworthy are some translations of the Orientalists that in the French translation of Harivamsa it is said, the 7 Prajapati, Rudra, Skanda, his son, and Sanat Kumara proceeded to create beings. Whereas, as Wilson shows, the original is, these 7 created progeny, and so did Rudra, but Skanda and Sanat Kumara, restraining their power, abstained from creation. The 4 orders of beings are referred to sometimes as Abhamsi, which Wilson renders literally waters and believes it a mystic term. It is one, no doubt, but he evidently failed to catch the real esoteric meaning. Waters and water stand as the symbol for Akasha, the primordial ocean of space, on which Narayana, the self-born spirit, moves, reclining on that which is its progeny. See Manu. Water is the body of Nara, thus we have heard the name of water explained. Since Brahma rests on the water, therefore he is termed Narayana. Linga, Vayu and Markandeya Puranas. Pure Purusha created the waters pure. At the same time, water is the third principle in material cosmos, and the third in the realm of the spiritual. Spirit of fire, flame, akasha, ether, water, air, earth are the cosmic, sidereal, psychic, spiritual and mystic principles, preeminently occult. In every plane of being, gods, demons, pitris and men are the four orders of beings to whom the term Ambamsi is applied. In the Vedas it is a synonym of gods, because they are all the product of waters, mystically, of the Akashic ocean, and of the third principle in nature. Pitris and men on earth are the transformations, rebirths, of gods and demons, spirits, on a higher plane. Water is, in another sense, the feminine principle. Venus Aphrodite is the personified sea, and the mother of the god of love, the generator of all the gods, as much as the Christian Virgin Mary is Mare, the sea, the mother of the Western god of love, mercy, and charity. If the student of esoteric philosophy thinks deeply over the subject, he is sure to find out all the suggestiveness of the term Abhamsi in its manifold relations to the Virgin in heaven, to the celestial Virgin of the alchemists, and even to the waters of grace of the modern Baptist. End of note. The Puranas, however, may afford a little more light. Being ever as he was born, he is here called a youth, and hence his name is well known as Sanat Kumara, Linga Purana, prior section 70, 174. In the Saiva Purana, the Kumaras are always described as yogins. The Kurma Purana, after enumerating them, says, "These 5, O Brahmans, were yogins, who acquired entire exemption from passion." They are 5 because 2 of the Kumaras fell. Of all the 7 great divisions of Dhyankohans, or Divas, there is none with which humanity is more concerned than with the Kumaras. Imprudent are the Christian theologians who have degraded them into fallen angels, and now call them Satan and demons, as among these heavenly denizens who refuse to create the Archangel Michael, the greatest patron saint of Western and Eastern churches, under his double name of Saint Michael and his supposed copy on earth, Saint George conquering the dragon, has to be allowed one of the most prominent places. See Book 2, The Sacred Dragons and Their Slayers. The Kumaras, the mind-born sons of Brahma Rudra or Shiva, the howling and terrific destroyer of human passions and physical senses, which are ever in the way of the development of the higher spiritual perceptions and the growth of the inner eternal man mystically, are the progeny of Shiva, the Mahayogi, the greatest patron of all the yogis and mystics of India. Note, Shiva Rudra is the destroyer as Vishnu is the preserver, and both are the regenerators of spiritual as well as of physical nature. To live as a plant, the seed must die. To live as a conscious entity in the eternity, the passions and senses of man must first die before his body dies. To live is to die, and to die is to live, has been too little understood in the West. Shiva, the destroyer, is the creator and the savior of spiritual man, as he is the good gardener of nature. He weeds out the plants, human and cosmic, and kills the passions of the physical, to call to life the perceptions of the spiritual man. End of note. They themselves, being the virgin ascetics, refuse to create the material being man. Well may they be suspected of a direct connection with the Christian Archangel Michael, the virgin combatant of the dragon Apophis, whose victim is every soul united too loosely to its immortal spirit. The angel who, as shown by the Gnostics, refused to create just as the Kumaras did. See Book 2, The Mystic Dragons and Their Slayers. Does not that patron angel of the Jews preside over Saturn, Shiva or Rudra, and the Sabbath, the day of Saturn? Is he not shown of the same essence with his father, Saturn, and called the son of time, Kronos or Kala, time, a form of Brahma, Vishnu and Shiva? And is not old time of the Greeks, with its skite and sand-glass, identical with the ancient of days of the Kabbalists, the latter ancient being one with the Hindu ancient of days, Brahma, in his triune form, whose name is also Sanat, the ancient? Every Kumara bears the prefix of Sanat, and Sana is Saturn the planet, Sani and Sara, the king Saturn, whose secretary in Egypt was Thothmes I. They are thus identified both with the planet and the god Shiva, who are in their turn shown the prototypes of Saturn, who is the same as Bel, Baal, Shiva and Jehovah Sabaoth, the angel of whose face is Michael, in Hebrew who is as God. He is the patron and guardian angel of the Jews, as Daniel tells us, verse 21. And before the Kumaras were degraded by those who were ignorant of their very name into demons and fallen angels, the Greek Ophites, the occultly inclined predecessors and precursors of the Roman Catholic Church after its succession and separation from the primitive Greek Church, had identified Michael with the Ophiomorphos, the rebellious and opposing spirit. This means nothing more than the reverse aspect, symbolically, of Ophis, divine wisdom, or Christos. In the Talmud, Michael, is a prince of water and the chief of the seven spirits, for the same reason that his prototype, among many others, Sanat Sujata, the chief of the Kumaras, is called Ambhamsi, waters, according to the commentary on Vishnu Purana. Why? Because the waters is another name of the great deep, the primordial waters of space or chaos, and also means mother, Amba, meaning Aditi and Akasha, the celestial virgin mother of the visible universe. Furthermore, the waters of the flood are also called the great dragon, or Ophis, Ophiomorphos. The Rudras will be noticed in the septenary character of fire spirits and the symbolism attached to the stanzas in Book 2. There we shall also consider the cross, 3 plus 4, and its primeval and later forms, and shall use for purposes of comparison the Pythagorean numbers side by side with Hebrew metrology. The immense importance of the number 7 will thus become evident as the root number of nature. We shall examine it from the standpoints of the Vedas and the Chaldean scriptures, as it existed in Egypt thousands of years before Christ, and as treated in the Gnostic records. We shall show how its importance as a basic number has gained recognition in physical science, and we shall endeavor to prove that the importance attached to the number 7 throughout all antiquity was due to no fanciful imaginings of uneducated priests, but to profound knowledge of natural law. Next section is section 14, the 4 elements.